Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely dismantle everything you thought you knew about why we age. Instead, we're looking directly at the actual source code of life. We're exploring a totally groundbreaking perspective that shifts how we understand getting older. We're moving away from this depressing story of inevitable decay and looking at it more like a case of cellular amnesia.
You know, we intuitively think of getting old, kind of like a car rusting over time, or a machine just wearing out from decades of heavy use. And that makes sense, right? But what if aging isn't a hardware problem at all? What if fundamentally it's just a software glitch?
Section 1. The wear and tear myth. Why the rusty car analogy fails.
So unlike an inanimate machine, your body continually renews its parts. Think about this for a second. The cells lining your intestines, they're completely replaced in just 2 to 4 days. And if we zoom into the molecular level, most proteins in your body turn over and replace themselves within about 3 to 13 days. Even in neurons that can live for over a century, the actual proteins making them up are in constant flux. You are, quite literally, constantly brand new.
Which raises a massive question. If our parts are constantly brand new, why on earth do we inevitably decline? Well, to understand this, we have to contrast our permanent genetic hardware with our degradable epigenetic software. Your genomic DNA is the hardware. It's mostly stable, and sure, mutations happen, but they really don't fully explain the systemic collapse of aging. The epigenome, however, is the software. It's the instruction manual telling your DNA which genes to turn on and off, and unlike your hardware, this software is highly susceptible to corruption over time.
Section 2. The Information Loss Theory. When the instructions degrade.
This brings us to a huge paradigm shift from the source research, known as the information theory of aging. It suggests that aging isn't actually about accumulating physical damage. It's about the loss of critical information. Basically, as time passes, we experience something called epigenetic drift. Even though our cells are perfectly renewed physically, they literally forget what they're supposed to be doing. A liver cell might sort of forget it's a liver cell, or a neuron might suddenly start expressing genes meant for a muscle cell. They lose those specialized gene expression programs, and when that happens, tissue function just slowly degrades.
The source paper brilliantly illustrates this concept using a Lego analogy. Imagine you accidentally drop a massive, complex Lego build and it shatters. Now, the original instruction manual tells you exactly how to build it from scratch, brick by brick. But it doesn't tell you how to piece those specific, random, broken chunks back together. So aging isn't about losing the plastic Lego bricks themselves, it's losing the instruction manual on how those specific pieces actually fit together in your adult body.
Section 3. Nature's Immortal Organisms. The Rule Breakers of Biology.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, so this is just an inescapable biological trap. But to see how biology can actually overcome this software corruption, we have to look at nature's extraordinary outliers. Because biological immortality, it's not science fiction. It is an observable fact in certain species. Take the freshwater hydra. This microscopic biological marvel replaces all of its cells every 4 weeks. Because it uses this massive reserve of stem cells to constantly rebuild itself, it rapidly wipes away genetic damage and expels mutated cells before they can ever accumulate into a glitch. In lab studies watching them for nearly 10 years, scientists found absolutely zero observable signs of senescence or aging.
Because of this constant, perfect regeneration, a hydra's chance of dying in any given year stays at a remarkably low, perfectly flat 0.6%. Forever. It literally never goes up. To put that into perspective for us humans, our mortality rates double roughly every 8 years, hitting around 50% at extreme advanced ages. But for the hydra, they're effectively frozen in biological time.
And it's not just the hydra. Other creatures pull off similar feats, but in totally different ways. Take the immortal jellyfish. When it gets stressed or starts aging, it literally reverts its mature cells backward into a cyst, just completely restarting its life cycle. Or look at planarian flatworms. You can chop them into pieces, and using special stem cells called neoblast, they flawlessly rebuild complete, perfectly proportioned new bodies. They achieve immortality by essentially constantly rerunning their developmental software.
Section 4. The Epigenetic Repair Network. How cells keep each other young.
So these immortal animals bypass epigenetic drift by literally resetting their biological software. They just reboot the whole system. But complex multicellular mammals like us, we can't really do that. We can't just revert back to an embryo. Instead, we rely on a cellular peer-to-peer network. To wrap your head around this network, think of each cell as a 5x5 grid of binary switches. The ones are active genes, the zeros are silenced ones. A perfectly healthy, specialized cell has one perfect row of ones.
But as random epimutations occur naturally as we age, switches start to flip. A 1 becomes a 0 becomes a 1. The cell slowly loses its perfect row, and as that pattern degrades, it literally forgets its identity.
Let's look at how this plays out. On one side, we see a single cell trying to maintain its own repair signal based on its active genes. If it loses too many of those genes, the signal drops and the cell forgets what it is. But on the other side, we see where the real magic happens. Cells don't exist in a vacuum. They constantly sync their software. They literally send out these extracellular vesicles, which are packed with epigenetic information, directly to their neighbors. So a healthy cell with a strong signal can actually compensate for a damaged neighbor by sending it instructions to flip the correct switches back on. They are actively keeping each other young.
But here is the fatal flaw in our peer-to-peer network. If a cell's profile becomes too corrupted, it doesn't just quietly shut down and fail. It actually starts broadcasting this faulty, senescent state to all its neighbors. Instead of sending out youthful repair signals, it starts transmitting corrupted code. And once a critical mass of cells flip over to this degraded state, it kicks off a chain reaction. It's a body-wide systemic collapse, which is exactly what we recognize as aging.
Section 5. The future of aging. Hacking the cellular network.
Okay, so the absolutely crucial point here is this. If aging is really just the progressive degradation of this shared cellular signal, we might theoretically be able to hack the network. We wouldn't necessarily need to go in and fix every single cell from the inside. We just need to change the signals they are sending to each other. This incredibly fascinating concept completely explains the phenomenon of heterochronic parabiosis. In these experiments, the circulatory systems of young and old animals are surgically joined, and researchers observe that introducing the blood of young animals actually rejuvenates the older animals. It's not magic. That young blood is absolutely packed with youthful, high-fidelity epigenetic signals. These signals flood the old cellular network, overwhelming the corrupted ones, and genuinely reprogram the aged cells back to a younger state. Now, naturally, evolution can only slow down this information loss by investing really heavy biological resources. This perfectly explains why things like caloric restriction can actually extend lifespan. When resources are scarce, the body assumes, hey, it's a bad time to reproduce, so it upregulates its cellular maintenance mechanisms just to survive until conditions improve. It literally pumps more energy into keeping that epigenetic signal strong. Based on all of this, the source research puts forward an amazing hypothesis. A single differentiated human cell could, in theory, be kept young indefinitely. How? Well, first, you supply it with targeted, youthful cell state information. Second, you make sure its underlying genomic DNA, the hardware, isn't broken. And third, you overwhelm any of those degraded signals with coherent, youthful intercellular communication. Basically, if you continually bathe an old cell in the correct, youthful software updates, it will maintain its youthful function. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought from the research. Evolution's only way of perfectly resetting our epigenetic software requires going all the way back to an embryo. And for adult humans, that's a bridge that requires the death of the current organism to make a new one. But if aging isn't some unstoppable mechanical decay and is really just a progressive loss of information across a cellular network, will our rapidly advancing technology be the patch that finally fixes our biological software glitch? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today. And as always, keep questioning everything you think you know.